residential tech talk, lighting specialist to our residential tech.
Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Dave Chace joins us from the Philadelphia area, where he is president of Cogent 360. Founded in 2007, Cogent 360 is a media design firm that creates interactive and immersive digital resources for the consumer electronics and home integration industries. Our guest today is a 35-year veteran of the CE and CI industries and a former director of product training for a nationwide specialty CE retailer. Dave started Cogent 360 to change how organizations educate their sales channels and consumers. Over the years, the company has evolved into an industry-leading media design firm and now incorporates virtual environments and 3D modeling to help companies around the globe. Dave Chace, thanks for joining us today to talk about your career, your company, and your observations about the smart home integration business.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. I really enjoy your podcast. And obviously, you and I go back several years, and so I'm delighted to join you here this afternoon. And yeah, simply put, I mean, I've been around the business for a long time. I got to update that. Actually, I think we're going on 38 years at this point. Let's put it this way: when I started in this industry, it was the same week that the space shuttle Challenger the one that went kaput. That was the week I started. And so it's been quite a long time. And, have come through all the different levels of the industry, starting out in sales, which back then was, do you want auto reverse or not? Our demo, it's funny, selling VCRs back then, our big demo was Top Gun.
Yeah. and now it's the big demo again. It's come around.
Yeah, now it's a whole different one, right?
Yeah.
But that was if you want to sell the really expensive hi-fi, the four-head hi-fi model. So things have changed quite a bit, but I worked for a company called Tweeter for many years, both on the sales side and in management, and then eventually transitioning to the training side. And it was a terrific company. Unfortunately, it went under, but I left before that happened. But while there, I mean, it really shaped, my perspective on a lot of things. I thoroughly enjoyed my experience there. Worked with some amazing people. And some of which you've had on the show, actually, Keith Esterly from HGSA.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Phil Jones, who's now at Massimo, Sound United, and a whole bunch of others. I mean, we joke about it. You can't swing a dead cat in this industry and not hit a former tweeter guy.
Well, those two guys are two of my favorite people to chat with, and we're great guests for sure.
They really are. And it's a sampling of the awesome people we had working.
Well, it's really cool to see how you've been doing this training business for a while now, and yet you're staying kind of on the edge of technology and new stuff. And before we get into that, I also noticed that you're still doing some in-person stuff. So I saw a post from you at the ProSource Summit. I didn't get to any of the buying groups this spring. I decided if I couldn't make it to all of them, I wasn't going to go to any of them, and I had some challenges with the travel, so I wasn't at ProSource in Vegas, and I saw you were there training about high-end audio sales. So you're probably utilizing some of your training materials and how you would guide integrators to present to their clients. But are you getting into like the weeds about the specifics of that technology because it's a high-end audio, or what was that training session all about?
Well, that one, that was a lot of fun. I actually co-presented with Jesse Coyer from Harman. And it wasn't so much about how the stuff is built. It's really more about the opportunity that exists and how to, essentially elevate your game and create more opportunities to present and ideally sell the really, the higher end luxury solutions. And it was kind of a holistic, perspective on the whole topic where we showed some really compelling statistics around the luxury market and how many people are buying luxury and the opportunities that are there. And then talked about, why still a lot of people tend to shy away, the intimidation factor or other reasons, why psychologically people tend to just, I'm going to stay in my comfort zone and show this instead of the really good stuff. But also, likewise, why people buy luxury. Okay, it's not just the rich guy who wants to show off. That's the bottom line. Are there some of those? Of course, but there's a whole lot of other reasons why people buy really high-end stuff. And so we talked about that, the psychological aspect. We talked about, again, why people shy away. But then we talked about specific methods and techniques and strategies that should hopefully make it a lot easier for everybody to more comfortably start presenting the really good stuff, and why, and justify, hey, listen, I'm not going to tell you what to spend, but I'll tell you why it costs what it does, and give you some strategies there to just present it more often and feel more comfortable getting in front of the more expensive key areas. Something I struggled with for a long time. When I was on the sales floor, I was intimidated by it, and I didn't want to look foolish. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of a customer. And so I tend to shy away from it until I learned more about the product knowledge side. This is really early on. But once I had that, like, how do I comfortably transition somebody to talking about it without me feeling like they think I'm trying to take their wallet?
Yeah.
And so, that was part of the conversation as well, just to make it more accessible and easier for people to present it. So it was a fun discussion.
Yeah. I mean, you brought to mind a comment I heard a while back about how, certain integrators are doing pretty well for themselves, but typically your sales guy maybe not going to be affording this audio gear for their own house. So sell with their wallet in mind, not your wallet in mind, or whatever the term is, right?
Yeah, selling out of your own wallet, that's a very popular and still a common situation where, well, I can't afford it. It just seems incredibly expensive, so nobody would buy it. And, it's money. It really is relative.
Yeah.
And so to somebody who earns, 15 times more than you do annually, a purchase of $20,000 or $30,000 or much higher, they have a whole different perspective on that. And so don't shy away because it's not something that you'd be comfortable spending that much money.
So looking back when Tweeter was no longer your home for your job, what was the transition like for you into doing this independently? Did you immediately sort of take what you were doing training wise at Tweeter and try to do that as a consultant, or how did your transition work back then?
It was interesting. We used to joke when we were, when Tweeter was still going, we had a pretty sizable and well-noted training department that was nationwide. There was 25 or 28 of us nationwide, and we would joke about that. Hey, if one of us ever started a company, providing some type of training and education service to the industry, there'd be an opportunity there. Because frankly, we'd see some amazing presentations. The vendors would come in and talk about their stuff. We saw some that were fantastic, but we also saw a lot that were, not the best. And so we thought, hey, I was, the company had really changed quite a bit. I was looking for something different. And so I thought I'd give it a shot. And early on, what I thought I could do was, hey, I've been in classrooms for years talking about all these products and all these vendors. And I could just go to them and say, hey, you should hire me to train on your stuff. But the fact is they already have people who do that. And to say that, well, they're not very good, you should hire me instead. It's not really a great business model. It's basically saying, hey, your baby's ugly, you should hire me. Right. But early on, when I pivoted early on to realizing that e-learning and some kind of online training was something that it was a boat that a lot of people were missing. They still are grounded in the face-to-face classroom or the lunch and learn type of concept. Let me come by the shop for half an hour or whatever. And listen, there's an enormous amount of value there, but there's also an awful lot of limitations, obviously. And so the concept of, hey, what if you had something that could complement that, where the salespeople or whoever the audience might be could get to the content 24/7 all year long. Mm-hmm. So if I just hired somebody, if you were here at my shop or my company, let's say 2 weeks ago, but now I just hired a new guy, I'm not going to see the rep from whatever company for another 6 or 8 months. What do I do in the meantime? Mm-hmm. How does he get up to speed? And so the concept of online training to a lot of companies was still, really relatively new. So I realized there's an opportunity there. And that became really the focus of our business for quite a while, for the first several years, building customized training. And, over time, the folks that we work with, luckily I had a lot of background in the industry and knew a lot of these companies and knew people there. And so over time built up a larger list of clients of really, high quality names in the industry, which gave us a good amount of credibility and kind of went from there. And it's over the last few years, we still do an awful lot of online training for many of the well-known names in the business. But we also now have gotten into a whole new world of technology with virtual capabilities and things like that. That's really exciting because it's a whole new frontier.
Yeah, I mean the world kind of came around to you, I would imagine, during COVID times, and how so much moved online and comfort, as well as the generation change where your integrators are doing a lot more virtual learning, probably just more comfortably because that's how they grew up, as opposed to wanting to travel to a manufacturer location or whatever it is, to get the education. A lot of people do still need the hands-on, of course, but to have that opportunity, that component to do some pre-learning or certification or that type of thing. Seems like the world's kind of come around to you on the technology, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, COVID obviously globally was a disaster in terms of what it did to the world in a lot of ways, but obviously there's some real upsides to it. And, in our little corner of the industry, yeah, it certainly it really accelerated, the awareness and demand for virtual resources. And so we were well positioned for that. And, what's great too is that when people started learning about this type of, say, hey, we need to have some kind of online solution or some kind of virtual solution, it gives us the opportunity to talk about, how good training is done, because that's part of it. Even if you're doing live training, I still see it done really the old-fashioned way. And where we're focused is not just the information. There's one of the biggest misconceptions in terms of how do you educate an audience, that so many companies still believe training is equivalent to just providing information. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of facts about this thing, okay? And now that I've provided that information, you're trained and you know it and you're comfortable with it. And that's not it at all. It's if you want people to learn, this is what we talk about with our clients. Say, listen, you're going to spend a lot of money and time and effort to educate your dealers and educate your audience. Wouldn't it be helpful if they actually understood it and, more importantly, could remember it and share it with the people who are going to spend the money on it? And so the whole concept of instructional design, which is a science, like how people actually learn information, how they absorb information and comprehend it, and more importantly, store it so they can remember later on. That's a lot of the fun in what we do. It's enlightening folks and in implementing those principles into the work that we create. So it's not just, hey, here's a bunch of stuff on a screen, which unfortunately a lot of e-learning is, or online training, I should say. And it has, to this day, there's some negative stigma around e-learning and such. Oh, it's just boring. It's just basically it's a PDF on your computer screen.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of the bad stuff is, but the good stuff is completely different. It's visually engaging, interactive, and so on. So it's great sharing that with a lot of folks.
So how much would you say between the integrators and the manufacturers is your business split? I know you do commercial and residential integration sides of the industry, but would you say that you mostly work with manufacturers on training, or have you started picking up a lot of integration clients as well who are maybe doing either consumer training or their own people training?
No, you're right. The vast majority of the work we do is typically with the vendors and the organizations, and who through them educate their audience. I struggled for years. Like, we would do some individual training sessions with dealers. The challenge there is the logistics involved and the cost, frankly, involved, where I would get a call from a dealer somewhere and say, hey, can you come out and do a session on whatever it may be? And the challenge there is to create a customized, let's say, 1 or 2 hour presentation is really time consuming, plus the cost of travel and so on. So it becomes really, cost prohibitive. However, the good news is, it's something I've been thinking about for a long time and working on for years. How do we provide a solution potentially directly to dealers? And we're working very hard on that right now, actually. And so optimally, this year you'll see some really cool stuff coming out that we're providing that can help dealers directly, leveraging this new technology that we're working with, like virtual and so on. But meanwhile, we're creating a ton of content for primarily vendors.
Okay. And when you're working with someone on your training advice and how to better do the process of learning, do you have an interview? Like, what are we training on here? And then you like kind of work out those anecdotes and things like that.
Exactly. I mean, every project always starts with the same and really fundamental question. We'll talk to the key stakeholders at a company. Like, for instance, one of the companies that we work with is the Harmon Luxury Group. We do all of the online training. We built their university, and we've been working with them for many years, and there's a ton of content there. And we've got it down really to a really efficient process at this point, where we actually provide them a template. The biggest challenge we find with manufacturers is you've got this dump truck full of information that they ultimately want to share most of it. There's so many people involved in the process of developing and releasing a new product, from the engineering folks to the product folks to the salespeople, the marketing people, and so on. They all have, these things they want to include in there. And the reality is, and this was part of the fundamental reason why I started the company, was looking at it from a salesperson's perspective, because I spent so much time on the floor, is that, look, think of these things. First of all, if a salesperson is interacting with a customer and they're going to present whatever particular product or solution, they generally have a window of opportunity, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, to really present this thing. And so you go to a training session and they'll have 1-2 hours of just endless bullet points of all these different facts. And I say, okay, now go figure it out. Go turn that into a 90-second elevator pitch on this product. That's brutal. And so many companies do that. And on top of that, all your stuff is combined with all the stuff from all the other manufacturers and products that they're dealing with. So we look at it a different way. We look at that interaction, that conversation with the ultimate consumer, the homeowner, and say, how do we work backwards from there? How do we teach them in a way that will most effectively enable them to have that conversation and present the product effectively? And part of that is the need to know versus the nice to know. Manufacturers are really proud of their engineering and their design and so on. They want to share a lot of facts. Well, it ain't all going to fit. The cognitive process is not going to fit. So how do you whittle it down to literally your 2 or 3 or 4 most compelling elements of this particular product, for instance, that distinguishes this versus all the others in the market, that makes it different? What problem is it solving, whatever? And that's how the whole project starts. What are your core selling points about this, your unique selling propositions? And we go from there. We build outlines and script it and so on and so forth. And eventually come up with a really cool, interactive experience where people can go in and learn. And secondarily, the other half of this is, how do people remember? Even if I have a great training, whether it's online or in classroom or whatever, one of the things that the industry also tends to miss is, what is your reinforcement mechanism?
Right.
If you had a fantastic training session, you went to a lighting training or whatever, like, this is great. But am I going to remember all that, particularly if it might not be a month until I actually talk about it? So creating other tools that we do, where, okay, in the field very easily with a couple taps of a finger, I can instantly get back to the information I need with other types of tools that we build. Instead of saying, like a lot of companies, well, yeah, go to our website and you'll see there's a library there, and that you'll get lost in almost instantly looking for some PDF. That it's just the dog's breakfast, this whole, massive compilation of documents and things. And it's, like I said, our focus is, how do we make that whole process easier for the guy at the end who's got to sell it ultimately, or for the consumer to understand it as well.
We will continue our conversation with Dave Chace after the break. Today's episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by NICE, the global manufacturer of smart home security and building automation solutions. NICE is bringing together 30 years of innovation with award-winning products from ELAN, SpeakerCraft, and Panamax to create a holistic ecosystem for builders, integrators, and consumers. Learn more about how you can create one home with one solution at go.niceforyou.com/RTT. Welcome back. We're talking with Dave Chace, president of Cogent 360. Dave, you're just telling about how you kind of distill down a training kind of objective, I guess, with your client. When you're talking about trying to get it to sink in, it's something like having even like quiz questions throughout a presentation just to make people kind of think back to something that they've just heard, help it settle in, or anything at the end that kind of, other than just having those resources available later on to go find. Is there anything that you try to do there?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one method. Typically you see when there's some type of online educational resource, there'll be a quiz or assessment at the end or throughout, like little knowledge checks. And because ultimately, again, the goal is you want to make sure they get it. Are you paying attention, and are you understanding what we're trying to share with you here? And so giving some kind of an assessment periodically certainly helps that, and to embed the information. But there's a lot of other ways as well. I mean, things like some kind of a simulative environment where they can go in and actually simulate either working with a product or solving a problem, or giving them some kind of a challenge. You can simulate a conversation with a customer if you're teaching a sales skill, for instance. Okay, here's a situation. What do you say here? And if they respond this way, what might you say? And here's some choices or whatever. And actually, with today's technology, we're getting to a point where we can actually create real conversations using AI-based characters, avatars. Where in the old days, you'd have to find somebody, film them against a green screen, and have a whole teleprompter. There's a big production to create these types of assets. Now we can actually create conversations with people that look perfectly real. And you can script the whole thing. It's really, really neat. But these are just a few of the many, many ways that get back to the instructional design component. How do you convey the information in a way that resonates and is going to stick? And that's the fun part.
Yeah, obviously that's the core and the knowledge base that you have and your experience and training and all that. But you mentioned AI and the tools that are available now for companies to use, whether they're the integration side or the manufacturer side. And using that, that's a great example where you don't have to film someone saying the words. What are some other tools, and maybe in particular with the AI technology, that you're able to present and use yourself or promote to the clients to help them make their job easier?
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, AI is becoming a very, very hot topic out there. In fact, 60 Minutes did a piece recently on it. And so, Chat GPT has been probably the most talked about new technology, although they talked about Bard, which is the Google version, basically. But that's just one element. The capabilities of these AI programs. ChatGPT, for instance, as an example. I mean, for those who aren't that familiar with this whole new technology, imagine you can go to something and it basically knows all the information since the dawn of time. Now, that's pretty powerful. Now, at this point in time, is all of the information perfectly accurate or up to date? Not yet, but that's going to be fixed. It's going to be, it's going to keep getting better and better and better. But if you had all of the information available, for instance, on the internet that you can instantly recall, it's really, really powerful. So, asking questions or learning about things, or it can help with things like design. It can help with, there's tools out there, for instance, for marketing. And I'll be talking more about this in other ways going forward, because there's so many things out there. If you've got an integration firm and you want to get on the map, you want to make yourself more known out there, the ability to create really compelling content like a blog, a video, YouTube videos, other marketing capabilities are incredible. So it's not just ChatGPT. You hear about, hey, students writing term papers using this thing. Well, that's one small thing it can do. I mean, if you know how to ask it the right questions, which really is a big thing in this world, like understanding the proper prompts, like what do I ask this thing so I get the best response? I mean, literally, there's a capability. You can start a business instantly where say, this is what I do. I sell home automation products, et cetera, et cetera. How do I start my business? And by the way, can you build me a website? It'll do it instantly. It's incredible what these things can do. From research, productivity, all these different elements that can be put to use. And so if you're just getting into the concept of AI, be aware that ChatGPT and Bard, these are just two of literally hundreds, or at this point possibly thousands of sites out there that have extraordinary capabilities that can really it can skyrocket your business and get you ahead of your competition quickly.
So you and I kind of reconnected in a weird way, not in person or even virtually, but your name came up when I believe I saw a press release from Residio, and then I also knew that you'd worked with URC, both with these kind of virtual tours. What was the idea behind those? Were both companies coming in with an idea what they wanted, or did you present them, hey, I can do this kind of a home tour where you can put your products in a actually created from virtual tools home, and we can walk someone through. How did those projects come about?
Well, it's pretty neat. Yeah. We work with both companies, and ultimately, hey, like I mentioned before, the ability to create a really compelling customer journey, to put somebody inside of what feels like an incredibly realistic home and allow them to explore and learn about different products and simulate different environments like the lighting, different lighting scenes and so on. I had talked with both companies about this, and they were really interested. And so ultimately, in both cases and in other cases as well, we've built an entirely virtual, it looks like a photograph, it looks completely realistic, but a virtual home that people can see on their website or on their device, and they can go in and explore the home, click on various elements, learn about URC products or Residio products and solutions and so on, and again get a much clearer idea of what it's like to live in a home with these types of systems installed. And for instance, from URC, they're getting, their dealers have access to it, and they're getting a lot of traction with it. It's a really powerful sales tool for them to show to their clients as far as, hey, here's what you can do if you thought about doing this or this. And it's been really helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, I've done those tours, and I thought that the idea of where you can turn on the outdoor landscape lighting, you can see day and night, like that really resonated with me, because you can kind of imagine, if you will, like something is going to be installed and it's going to light up the trees a certain way or the pathway. But when you see it like that, it really sells itself. I mean, that's my house. That's what it's going to look like. Obviously, this is a specific virtual house, but you can get a very good idea what it's supposed to look like, and that's hard to recreate from a conversation with a client.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And so a lot of folks are challenged by trying to visualize what you're explaining to them. So this, you don't have to. Like, hey, take a look at this, and notice how you can click a button, how the scenes change. Now we go from day to night, and the landscape lighting is there. And everything else, all of the the touch panels and all different types of products and audio and so on is really, really neat, and just makes it so much easier for people to understand the value of these types of systems. And like I said, what appears to be a very, very realistic environment. And so you're going to see a lot more of these types of things as time goes by, from virtual smart homes to things like virtual showrooms and other types of environments as well, experience centers. It's a very growing trend, and I'm really having a lot of fun kind of being out on the leading edge of it, creating this really cool stuff.
And I know you were mentioning that VR is not the greatest sometimes, because the headset is kind of a uncomfortable experience for a lot of people, especially you're talking about high net worth people. You don't want to make them put this headset on and go through that whole thing. I know there have been some solutions where they can literally build a space like in real time in front of you with the virtual headset. I mean, I see some value in that, but maybe not using the headset. What do you think about that application of technology?
Well, when you say building the system,
where you're literally like you're in a room and you can say, how about we put the screen over here, projector here, and you can sort of kind of design a room in front of the client or put it together.
Yeah, that's cool stuff, and that's sort of the second half of the equation. They sort of serve different purposes, where you have virtual as a design tool type of element. Well, like, hey, now that we've decided we want to do this, yeah, let's figure out the room and where everything should go, and the spacing and all of that. And there's some really great technology out there that accomplishes that. Ours is more on the front end. We're using different types of modeling tools and so on. So this is more on the sales and marketing side and education side. How do we create its realistic environments possible and load it with different ways that people can understand what the possibilities are? And then once they do that, then you can use other tools that allow you to configure different things and design it and so on.
So kind of to wrap up, if you have a company that's looking to work with you on their training specifically, what would their best prep be so that they're in the right kind of mind space or headspace of, this is what we're going to need to kind of distill our message down to? So maybe even saves you a little bit of that process when you get together with them. What's the best thing that they need to sort of think you mentioned earlier, not to get wrapped up in all the engineering speak. And that's a whole thing with our industry. People they love to talk about how things are built. And that's not necessarily going to resonate with everyone you're trying to.
Yeah, maybe not. But it's a great thing because it means, there's so much passion in our industry. People love talking about what they do and talking about their products. And so that passion does come across. But to your point, as far as, hey, listen, if we got to educate our audience, again, whether it's dealers or consumers or whatever, the idea is, first and foremost, have an idea what success looks like. In other words, okay, if we do this, however we do it, if it achieves our objective, what are we looking to do? Ideally, everyone out there is talking about our products consistently, accurately, effectively, and articulating what's great about our product to the end user. And so, okay, think about what you want the success factor to look like. Then come back and say, all right, what are the most compelling elements of whatever it is that we're going to be teaching about? If it's a product, if it's a projection screen or a projector or an automation system, whatever it might be, understand there's a lot of competition out there and there's an awful lot of facts about a lot of products. What is the most compelling story about your product? What separates it from the competition? What really distinguishes yours? What problems does it uniquely solve? Because that's a great place to start. Don't just go with okay, here's a whole library of facts we just want to get across to everybody, because now you're what they call the red ocean. You're doing the same thing everybody else is doing, which is just dumping a whole bunch of information on their heads. Let's find a story. That's a big part of what we do. Is let's do some storytelling. People learn through storytelling, right? Yeah. So what's the story about your product? Not just how your company started. That's part of it. A lot of companies love talking about the garage back in 1962 in San Jose, right? But it's how did this product come about? Why did you build it? Why did you create it? And what's unique about it? And we turn that into a narrative, and it's gonna stick better. People are gonna get it and be able to repeat it to customers.
Well, that sounds like a great plan, and we love storytelling on this podcast, so that message resonates for sure with us. And Dave, I really appreciate you taking the time today. And I know we tried to demonstrate some things. We had a couple of technical challenges with the platform here, and so we're gonna post links to the URC home tour, and I think the Residios one as well on our show notes, so folks can go there themselves and do their own virtual tours and see your handiwork. So hope you have a great summer and continue to do great things here with your clients.
Oh, I really appreciate it, Jeremy. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure getting together with you. I want to thank you for the opportunity for being here and spending some time with you. And rock and roll. Let's have a great 2023. The industry, all of the projections are, it's going to be a really big year. So I'm excited to see what's ahead.
Let's keep it up. Dave Chace is president of Cogent 360, a media design firm that creates interactive and immersive digital resources for the consumer electronics and home integration industries. You can learn more about his company at cogent360.com. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Residential Tech Today, IPW, and Pretty Easy Podcasts. Go to prettyeasypodcast.com if you are looking to get professional production help on your own podcast at an affordable rate. And if you're new to Residential Tech Talks, easy for me to say, please subscribe to the weekly podcast wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at the magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Friday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist to Residential Tech.
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.